Okay, that was cool. I can't wait to see that documentary. It premiered at the Sundance Film Festival to rave reviews. So please welcome Chuck Lorre and Norman Lear. So thank you so much for coming out to...
He didn't borrow that, he had that made. He found something.
It's possible the hat is the whole secret. You don't want to take any chances.
How does that make you feel? Oh, you're going to take it off? Oh, okay. I was listening to the intro here, and it's all about longevity. And my God, we have two guys here who are the definition of that. And so the natural first question, I think, is how do you do it? I mean, in this day and age, you know, where I would think somebody starting out, it's so much more difficult because people use up everything so fast. And you've had a career, Norman, that goes... I mean, I think your first writing job was in 1950 or something like that, and
Yeah, but this is the first moment I've heard you say just what you said.
really,
This is the first moment I've sat and looked out at this crowd. The first moment I've sat in this chair with Chuck Lorre in this chair. This is the fucking beginning.
You guys have met Yoda, right?
No, I mean, every minute is another beginning. I couldn't believe anything more.
well, it is actually, and you know, and you keep working, you keep turning it out. I mean, right now, I think you're doing a new version of One Day at a Time.
We made the 3rd episode last night.
Wow.
Wow.
And we work the way Chuck Lorre works, with a live audience. So we don't make up the laughter, they provide it or they don't.
That's great, because both of you have done that. There's so much of television is single camera, and you guys have only worked, as far as I can tell, in multi-camera, having that audience out there. What is it about that that makes that the way you want to do comedy these days?
Well, there's an energy that comes off an audience that gets into the performance. I mean, it's unquestionable. Different kind of performance you get from actors working in front of a live audience.
They're riding, in a sense, they're riding the emotions of the audience that are reacting to them at that moment.
Are you, do you watch Chuck's shows?
The only show I really have seen a good deal of is The Big Bang Theory.
That's good enough.
We were talking earlier, it's impossible today. I have a good friend, somebody I respect, every other day saying, you mean you're not watching X, Y, Z, some other show?
There is a lot on television now, much more than, for instance, 45 years ago when All in the Family went on the air. There were only 3 networks.
There were only 3
Imagine that.
Hard to believe.
Now there's 400.
I think America's greatest product is excess. In everything.
So now, Chuck, I know when I was talking to you out there, I said, well, you know, this is what we're going to talk about. And I said, you know, what do you want to talk? You said, I just want to sit and listen to Norman talk. Such a fan. Everybody here is such a fan. But what was it about Norman Lear for you that inspired you in your entrance into this part of the business?
Well, he clearly made it obvious to everyone that comedy wasn't predicated on contrived situations. I mean, even the word sitcom fell apart when he began to work, because prior to that time it was very appropriate because I was married to a witch. That's a situation, you know? An astronaut comes home with a genie, it's a situation. It could be called a sitcom, but, you know, beginning with All in the Family, that was just life, and it was just, good comedy was just life, people in relationships, and in families dealing with one another. There was no more sit in the it was just comedy of life, and that's something that I got a taste of when I was on Roseanne 26 years ago. And she was very adamant about, you know, pursuing that, and she raised the bar. You know, it was really,
So to speak,
No,
that was a little pun.
no. Oh, I said bar. She dropped that name. Weren't you paying attention? No, but she made it. She made it. It was boot camp. You know, it was really difficult, and everybody I think that worked there got better because she was insistent on pursuing comedy of life as opposed to the situational kind.
She had quite a reputation during those 9 years.
We don't need to go into that.
How many years did you work on that show?
I did 2 years.
2 years. Okay, that's like boot camp. Okay, now let's talk about All in the Family, because I just want to go back to that time when that show. I remember watching it for the first time, and I said, "How did this ever get on television?" And it didn't very easily get on television.
We made it. The first episode. It was always the same. I never changed the first episode. Sold it originally in 1968 to ABC. ABC made the first pilot. It had Carol O'Connor and Gene Stapleton and 2 other young people. But it was exactly the same script as they caused me to make a year later, ABC, with 2 other young people. Not because they wanted to see different young people, but because they were trying to make up their... They were scared. They were laughing as they watched it and were scared. And I'm reminded, before CBS picked it up, I went to focus groups. It was interesting to sit behind a glass, one-way glass, watching 50, 60 people in a small room. They had a dial on under their right hand. If they liked something, they turned to the right. If they didn't like it, they turned to the left. A big instrument like a clock is up there showing what they like, what they don't like. And I'm watching, sitting behind them. You know, when an audience laughs, a belly laugh, they kind of tend to get up and go this way. It's like, it's romantic. It's so beautiful to watch an audience from behind when they're really laughing hard. So I'm watching these people laughing hard, but they don't want to laugh at the bigots, so they're turning the dial the other way. So that look what this, they're reacting negatively and laughing their asses off. So, I mean, that tells you everything. If you go by the judgment, I think I know better than they know what they're going to enjoy. You're going to be a network.
So how did it wind up on CBS then after ABC did all
A
of
new
that?
Robert Wood, and the person of Robert Wood came to was the new president of CBS. He had heard about that show, wanted to see it, saw it, said, "I'm putting it on." But before it went on, the night of, I had a lot of fights with what was called program practice. Do you have program practices today at the network?
We call them assholes.
They were not as individuals. You know, as individuals, they were good guys. But in their jobs, reporting to this person who reports to that person who reports to this person, they were not being themselves. And the first episode of All in the Family was, the premise was, they were at church on a Sunday morning. It was their anniversary, their 25th anniversary. Mike and Gloria were making a brunch for them. So they were alone in the house, and everything was finished. Balloons were hung, stuff was cooking, and Mike kisses Gloria. It's rare that they have the house alone. Let's go upstairs. He gets her to go upstairs with him. As soon as they're upstairs, the front door opens. They come home early from church because Archie hated the sermon, complaining about the sermon and the minister and so forth. And at the slam of the door, the kids start coming downstairs. Archie assesses the moment and says, 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning. They wanted that out. Wow. Now, we've gone through a lot of nonsense about, and that's why they had advisement on, is that what they call it? Advisement on, watch at your own peril.
Parental warning.
Yeah. And the reason they wanted it out was when he says 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning, they're going to know what, they're going to imagine, the audience is going to imagine what he's referencing. Weren't they going to imagine it when they ran up the stairs? When they came down the stairs? No, this line, 11 o'clock on a Sunday when I had to come out. I said I wouldn't show up the next day if that line was out. I was on my way home, or just ready to leave the office the night of the show when I got a call that it aired with the line intact in New York. This was before the coaxial cable and so on.
Civilization prevailed.
Civilization prevailed. I thought of it as silly, and if I gave in, I mean, I don't want it to sound so brave because I had a 3-picture deal offered to me as a result of Cold Turkey.
Yes,
Yeah.
which is a great
So
movie.
United Artists had offered me 3 pictures, so I was in good shape. I didn't. But my father used to call me the laziest white kid he ever met. So Archie had my father was a touch of Archie, and I'm not, you have to put down a race of people to call me lazy. That's not what I'm doing, and you're the dumbest white kid I ever met. So I lived with that. I had to do this. And, we did the show, and they probably got some letters, but they had people on the phone all across the country. They had extra phones at the associated stations, affiliated stations, and there wasn't a state that seceded from the Union.
That was at the height of the Nixon years. Nixon was president then. There was so much material. I can't imagine that you would be chomping at the bit right now to have Archie Bunker back talking about this.
Have you never heard Nixon on talking about in the White House tapes? He talks about All in the Family and Archie Bunker.
Oh, he did. Oh, yeah.
It's the greatest 3 minutes of my life. He's talking with Ehrlichman about this thing he saw. He said, how do they make such fun of a good man? That's
Can you imagine what Donald Trump would say about Archie Bunker if...
He is Archie Bunker. I think of Donald Trump as the middle finger of the American right hand. And it's the American people saying, this is the kind of leadership you give us, because they didn't invent him, the Republican Party handed him to him. And I think they're saying, screw you. They're not. Look how quiet it is.
We're hanging on to every word.
We are really seriously agreed that this is bad for America. And I'm sure there are Republicans here too, and everybody knows this is bad news. Why is it happening?
It's network, actually. It's Patty Chayefsky sort of predicting a lot of this, but it's a reality television star, and that's what has made him the Republican nominee. It's a sort of weird thing.
But I think the American people are saying, this is the kind of leadership you're giving us everywhere. Screw you. I don't think they're married to the notion that this is going to be a great president.
And again, it goes back, don't you wish you had that platform where you did this every week and you talked about these issues and you talked about them just like you did now, but through your characters? There isn't as much of that. Television changed after the All in the Family and Maude and those years where those shows did that, and then it went in a different direction again.
Well, South Park.
Well, Chuck, what would you say about where television is today versus where it was then? And do you sort of lament the changes, or do you welcome? Is this the golden age?
I avoid lamenting as a general rule. I just don't like it.
Sure that.
If you looking back is easy, but it seems to move there's a pendulum swing. It's really clearly, it became very conservative again in the 80s. And then it went through a great decade of sarcasm in the 90s. And frankly, looking back at my own career now, the things I learned to do when I was on Roseanne, I applied them to a show I did called Grace Under Fire. I only did it for 1 year, but I applied the same rules to that, and then I moved away from it. And I can't honestly tell you why I moved away from it, but you know, I was looking for something else in terms of storytelling. But the big picture as to why it swings, human nature, it'd be the only answer I could have. It's just, it seems the country always, God bless America, finds the middle.
Yeah.
You know, but the swings can be terrifying.
It seems like you're hitting it a little bit with Mom now, the show with Allison Janney and Anna Faris.
Well, that was, from the inception, was the only reason to try and do a new show at this point was to go back to what I had learned 25 years ago, which I'd learned from you, which was to tell stories that had no contrivance to them at all. They were just simply a reflection of how life happens to us.
Is this Mom's first season?
We just finished our third.
Oh.
I'll get you the DVD. But you know, I wanted to discuss recovery. You know, recovering from the seemingly hopeless state of mind and body of alcoholism and addiction, and recovery could be funny. The addiction itself, you know, the darkness of that, I couldn't find a way to make that into a comedy, but I think we cracked the code when we realized that to tell the story, it was to be a story of hope, that recovery is possible. It's clumsy, but it's possible, and that's what we've been trying to do. And we've gotten a little bit braver as we've gone along. We've realized that, you know, things that we would never touch on in a comedy were accessible to us if we found a way in. I think in the second season, Allison Janney and Anna Faris's character have to deal with their friend who is going through chemo for breast cancer. Now, you wouldn't normally, as a writer, even use the word. The word's radioactive. It's kryptonite. You wouldn't even bring it up. But what we discovered in making that effort was the comedy was in their well-meaning but incompetent attempts to be a supportive friend. They wanted so much to be there for her, but being self-obsessed, selfish people who are new to altruism, they didn't know how. And it was
I
really,
love that expression, new to altruism.
you know, the addict and the alcoholic is the epitome of selfishness. But in recovery, you know, you start to recognize there's other people out there, and you can actually love and care for them, but you don't know how. And that was a great lesson as a writer. That, you know, but it wasn't apparent immediately. We didn't really know how to do it, but it felt like, let's try. Let's try. It's this point in my life, certainly, it's worth trying.
Does this stuff come out of your own lives? I mean, is Archie and Edith Bunker related to you in some way?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the foolishness of the human condition, I relate to. You know, I'm 9 years old. When my father is arrested, he goes away for 3 years. My mother is selling the furniture, and because she can't live in shame in Chelsea, Mass, where we were living. And while somebody is negotiating about my father's red leather chair, from which we listened every Friday night to the fights in Madison Square Garden with our Atwater Kent radio. I mean, worst moment for me at 9. And some fool puts his hands on my shoulder and says, "Well, you're the man of the house now." Even at 9, I guess I got it. You know, what a fool. And when I cry, he says, "Are they there? Man of the house doesn't cry." Asshole. And I got it. I mean, wherever you find human beings, you'll find frailty and laughter. And it starts with the amount of holes in our body. That's not a serious statement.
And Chuck, for you, I know recovery was a big issue for you in your life. And so did that whole idea come out for that particular show from your own life in that sense?
I definitely wanted to tell that story. Yeah, no question about it. It's very personal to me. Yeah.
And what about, did you live a swinging singles life with a brother in a house like 2.5 men?
I was more Alan than Charlie.
I want to talk about that show a little bit, because talk about pushing the envelope. You know, you watch that show and it's on all the time now, like at 6:30, 7 o'clock at night.
Thank you, Jesus.
Yeah. In syndication, but I mean at all times, and you got away with more. I can't imagine the censorship problems you had with CBS on that, like he had. Can you talk a little bit about that? How you got away with all that stuff on 2.5 Men?
Well, we had an open bar in the green room for the CBS executives, so that helped. But there was constant negotiation, and at a certain point, all I was chasing was to make people laugh. There was no effort to shock. I've said this before. Shocking is pretty easy. It's pretty easy to shock an audience, but laughter is a genuinely priceless thing, and when you get it, you want to hold on to it. When the network says you can't say 11 o'clock on Sunday morning, you want to defend the laughter, because that's a golden laugh, and we would do that all the time. And oddly, what would happen is so many times the negotiation we'd lose the line that offended the censor, and we put something in that they were happy with, which was far more offensive. It was grotesque. It was shock. And I get their problem solved. We moved on, and it became a kind of a silly game over a period of time. But again, the nature of the show kind of revealed itself as we were going along. This is a body show. You know, it was the voice of the show. It's not the voice of the Big Bang Theory. It is not the tone of the Big Bang Theory. It was very specific to that show, and it worked. It really worked, and I wanted to protect it as much as I could. So there was lots of arguing, and and pouring lots of white wine for the censor so she wouldn't notice. See if I could get her blind drunk while the show was being taped. There's some more Chablis.
Is there something that either one of you have just gotten away with? You sort of hit on that.
I don't buy the expression "gotten away." I've gotten away with nothing in my life. It wasn't what I was trying to do. I haven't gotten away with it. I've paid for it.
You've certainly gotten a lot of stuff on, and both of you, oddly enough, have in different eras had the #1 comedy, and we'll not call either one of them a sitcom because they aren't, but the #1 comedy on CBS for several years running. That gives you power. And how did you decide to use that power of an overwhelming hit show?
I decided to use it wisely. With other shows. No, I hope I did. I mean, we were. I love what you said before, how you didn't say it this way, but at the beginning of it all, you're trying to make a living. You're married, you got a family started, or a family on the way, or a family there, and you're trying to make a buck. And I am a serious human being. I take life seriously. I take its meaning seriously. And I'll find a comedy in the foolishness of the human condition somewhere. And it exists there. I knew Archie Bunker. I never knew what Carol O'Connor could do with a script.
He was not a cocky actor.
That's worth dwelling on a second. You know, the magic of, you got a bunch of words, and you know they're good, but then somebody comes in and inhabits those words, and it's one of the greatest thrills ever. This man came in, I had a script, I knew it was funny, I knew I had a character, but I never imagined Carol O'Connor in it. And before he finished the first page, it blew my mind. And I don't know, it's just one of the great men. Then 3 people fell into line, and all of the chemistry between, in every direction, between those 4 principals was a gift from the gods. Who could know? I couldn't guess that. I guessed, but I couldn't guess that their chemistry would be what it became. So
Carol O'Connor was a dramatic actor, really, up until that point.
he was. I had seen him in a film. Blake Edwards did a film. What did you do in the war, Daddy?
Yes.
You're
James
probably
Coburn.
too young to remember that. What did you do in the war, Daddy? Yeah. And he was in it for a moment. I wanted that face. I wanted to hear that man read. That's all I knew. I called. I thought I was in New York, and when I started casting, I'd seen a lot of actors. Wanted to see Carol O'Connor. I was coming out to California to see him and a group of others, and I thought I'd like to talk to Mickey Rooney also.
Wow.
So I knew his manager, Red Doff was his name. So I called Red Doff, and I said, I'd love to talk with, I never met the man. And he said, Mickey, he's in my office. Why don't you talk to him? I said, no. I want to come out. I'll let him read the script and talk to him about the part. I don't want to describe it. Mickey Rooney heard the thing. He said, I want to talk to him. Again, I never met the man. He talked to him about himself in the third person. Norm, you want to do something with the Mick? What is it? I said,
Always a bad sign.
I'm coming out. I'll be out there in a couple of days. Doug, you got something to make? Tell him now. I said, well, he's a bigot. He said he and spick and you know. And he said, no, they're going to kill you in the streets. They're going to shoot you. You want to do something with the Mick? Listen to this. Vietnam vet, blind, private eye, large dog. I said it in reverse. Private eye, short, blind, large dog. I did something with him later. I loved him. He was great.
Oh, you did? Oh, wow. He never really had a hit TV show. He tried several times. Yeah. But the longest continuous career in movie history was Mickey Rooney. It would have been interesting to see him as Archie Bunker. I'd always heard that he was somehow involved
That's
there.
how the extent of it.
Fate often comes into play here in casting, I guess. You just get that chemistry, and I know in your shows too, Jim Parsons walks in, and you know, who knew that that cast would meld like the way they do? How did you know?
When he walked in the room, you recognized immediately this was something entirely unexpected. He embodied the character beyond my wildest dreams. The words were far better than I could have ever hoped for. It was so when he walked out of the audition, and I turned to the casting director. I said, I don't believe this. I asked him to come back. I want to see if he can do it again. I just had never seen anything like that. You know? And I've had that experience a couple of times. You know, Melissa McCarthy came in and read for Mike and Molly and went, oh my God, this is incredible. And you know, I should give a shout out to Nikki Valco, who's been my casting director for 20 some odd years. Melissa was the first person who walked in and read for that part. So was Billy Gardell. When I started casting the 2.5 Men, she said, I want you to see this little boy, Angus T. Jones. He was fantastic, you know. he was the only boy I brought to CBS, and you know they like you to bring choices. And I just, here it is. We don't get a choice? No, not this time. That's our guy. Yeah.
And when you put together 2.5 Men with Charlie Sheen, who obviously was a well-known commodity before and obviously during, and
What are you laughing about?
that's an interesting subject right there.
No, it's not. Let's talk more about Mickey Rooney. How's a guy 5 feet tall be in the U.S. Army? Buying that.
But the chemistry there between Charlie and John Cryer.
It was unmistakable, and they did, and CBS steadfastly refused to cast John Cryer.
Wow.
No, they didn't
He
want-
had done so many movies and different things.
I don't think speaking out of school, but when we had the first conversation about casting for the brother, the words that were said by an unnamed executive were, let's talk about who's going to play Charlie's brother, and let's be clear, we don't want to hear the words John Cryer.
Wow.
So it was such a fun moment when I went to CBS with John Cryer. I said, who are you bringing with you today to read for the part? And I said, you're not going to be happy. And he just, you're bringing Cryer. You got to see him. He's brilliant. And he and Charlie and Angus are, it's a show. You can feel it. It's tangible. It's so obvious. And, you know, John's gone on to become, you know, he's a master of the craft. And so, you know, it was one of those nice moments where they said, here's the rope. Go hang yourself. Yeah.
What did they have against him?
He had been in a bunch of failed shows. And, you know, and the term show killer is applied to somebody who's good enough to go through the most arduous process available to get into a lead role on several shows that then didn't work. But taking into account, he won those roles every time. The shows didn't work, but the actor is the actor. You know, he can do everything. So I mean, we got rid of that label.
Did you ever have to fight for any of the actors in all your very many shows that you did? Was there anybody that they said no, or they just trusted you?
I don't recall. No, I don't recall fighting over an actor. Usually, you know, there was some film to look at. And, I want to think about it. Maybe we can come back tomorrow.
And you know, I was thinking, sitting here watching you two and talking about 2.5 Men, which is about two brothers living together and kind of swinging lifestyle, and that one sort of dragging the other one in. And you produced a movie in the 60s called Come Blow Your Horn, written by Neil Simon, with Frank Sinatra and Tony Bell, which was very much the exact same premise.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, it was Neil Simon's first. It was his first film. He worked with his brother. He was called Doc Simon when he was 23, 4 years old, and his older brother was. Oh God, this is the best mother story that ever was. My mother lived in Bridgeport, Connecticut after my dad passed, remarried, and she lived in Bridgeport in a big building where the women used to gather in the late afternoons, and there were a lot of couples and single women whose husbands had passed. They used to gather in the late afternoons in the lobby. And Neil Simon had a brother, Danny. Neil Simon has a brother, Danny. And they worked on the Monterey show for us, Simmons and Lear. And Neil became this giant success, play after play after play after play. And one afternoon, the women are sitting about, and son Danny walks in. And Mrs. Simon said, "Oh, girls, I want you to meet my son's brother."
That premise Lewis of Come Blow Your Horn actually came out of, they lived together, I guess, Neil and Danny.
Yes.
At the time, and so it was the older one and the younger one. And but I digress. But I love your film career. You know, everybody knows Norman Lear from the television successes and everything, but you had a wildly successful movie career, particularly in the '60s. Great movie, Cold Turkey, and
I love that you feel that way. I love Cold Turkey. It's around.
Dick Van Dyke and Bob Newhart, about a town that tries to quit smoking.
And two of the do you old enough to remember Bob and Ray on radio? And Bob and Ray, they were my idols.
Divorce.
We always talk, walking on the shoulders of other people who preceded you. Bob and Ray preceded me, and Fred Allen preceded me, and oh my God, did I have heroes in comedy. Burt Lahr, burlesque.
Let me ask you, you worked for Martin and Lewis, Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis, at the very height
At the very beginning
of the Colgate Comedy Hour.
We were with them through the first 3 years of the Colgate Comedy Hour.
That was one of your first writing jobs,
Yes.
you and Ed Simmons, right?
It was exactly our second writing job.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you wound up with them, and how did that come out? How did you hook up with
We were selling door to door out here, Simmons and I, and writing it in the evening.
I did door-to-door sales.
Did you? Yeah, what were you selling?
Whatever I could find for $7 and sell for 14.
Did you knock on a door with anything under your arm, pretending you were to give it to the?
No, but what I would do is, there are buildings all over Los Angeles that say no soliciting. I felt that was an invitation. You don't mean me, and I'd go in and it actually, nothing gets wasted. It was helpful, because if you can sell people that are trying to throw you out of a building, an FM radio the size of a credit card, you can sell a sitcom.
We were selling furniture door to door. We were taking out. I love the expression. We would show up at Gann's, G-A-N-Z Brothers. They sold furniture and had some lousy store, but they sold out of it. And we were driven to territory. I love that, to territory. And territory was where you saw tract homes and bicycles and sleds and whatever in the driveways. And I was terrible at it, because I knew that husbands would come home and say, "What the hell did you do here?" Listening to this guy sell you. Some of the times we did photographs. I made the appointments for our Mr. Simmons, who was going to be there in the afternoon. He'd take the pictures, or he'd make the appointments for me, and you'd sell, 2,000 photographs that nobody needed of their kids. Anyway, I hated it.
So selling door to door is an invitation to becoming a great comedy writing legend, I guess.
We were writing at night. One day I read that Danny Thomas, his agent was reading Variety, was William Morris. Called William Morris at lunchtime, praying that the guy who was his agent, turned out to be a guy by the name of Phil Kellogg, was out to lunch. He was out to lunch. I got his secretary. I'm Norman Lear. I'm at the airport now. I just spent 2 days with Danny Thomas. I'm going to write the article on the plane. I'm going to file it as soon as I land. I've got 2 questions I have to ask him. I need his. She gave me his phone number. I called him. He picked up the phone. He was alone in the house with his pianist accompanist. Wally Pop was his name. Remember that too. And he was fascinated with how I got his. He laughed when how did you get my number? I told him how I got his number. He thought that was funny. And I said, he was looking through his material to find something that he could do at Ciro's the very next night for a Friars evening where they knew his material. And so I said, well, how much time are you going to do? He said, 5 minutes. This won't take more than 5 minutes. He said, I learned it fast. He said, oh yeah. I said, yeah, you learned it very fast. Get over here right away. I said, we'd be over. So this is like, 12:30. I said, well, we'll be there by 5. You said you're calling from Hollywood. I'm in Beverly Hills. What's going to take you so long? But we hadn't written this thing yet. Anyway, we got there. He bought it. He did it the next night. We were in the kitchen looking out, watching him. And he killed. This was 5 Yiddish words, 3 Yiddish words that took a paragraph to say in English. Zemisch, tumult, and verblunchet. Gradations of frustration. And I remember the last one. The last one was a guy in a truck with a 2-story building behind him, a house, that he was driving someplace in a pouring rain and pulled into a dead-end street. He was far blunted.
And you're just jumping over the point that you sold Yiddish humor to a Lebanese comic.
He did Yiddish humor, this Lebanese guy. That's what he told long stories with great finishes. So anyway, the next day, 2 days later, we flew to New York. We were doing the Jack Haley Ford Star Review because David Susskind was in the audience, and he was an agent at MCA, and that was the first work. That was the first job. The Jack Haley Ford Star Review. Jerry and Dean were coming on. There was only this much television to look at. Jerry saw some sketch we did for Jack Haley on our second episode, and said, I want those guys. MCA was there to do his bidding, they got us.
There's a great story, by the way, and if you got to get Norman's book, it is fantastic. So many great stories, but there's one of the funniest stories I've ever heard about Jerry Lewis. You walked in and he was like totally naked or something. Do you remember that?
Oh, yes. Yes, I remember. You really want me to tell you?
Yes, yes.
They were playing the Shea Parade in Chicago. We were working on the second Colgate Comedy Hour. We were staying at a camera, I remember the fancy hotel we were staying at. And it was Jerry's birthday. And we were taking him out to dinner, a group of us. But Simmons and I were on the same floor. And we walked down to his hotel room, knocked on the door, ready to go to dinner. And he said in his inimitable, I can't begin to do it. We opened the door, and it was pitch black. And suddenly a match is struck here, and that's all we see as it's coming down. He's naked. He's got a tiny birthday candle in an erection.
Ay, qué bon.
And he's lighting it and singing, happy birthday to me.
Ay.
It must have been fun working with that kind of talent.
He was, in those years, the funniest human being possible.
It's still going. He's still.
Well, but you can trace what happened to his comedy by looking at the yearly muscular dystrophy telethons, when he started to take himself very seriously and become the Pope. And you could trace that over the years. You just watch those shows, and he became the Pope. He knew everything.
Now, Chuck, how did you?
Now, I want to end by saying I couldn't be more grateful to the man, because nobody ever made me laugh harder, and I know I owe him 15 to 17 years.
You actually.
I mean, of my life.
And Chuck, how did you started very differently. You were actually a singer, songwriter.
I was a musician, yeah. I was trying to, I came out here to be Randy Newman. in 1973.
He wrote the score to Cold Turkey.
No.
Wow, really?
I was enamored with that kind of songwriting, and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be Randy Newman with a Stratocaster. And I came to Los Angeles. I had all my Randy Newman albums, Sail Away and 12 songs, and I looked at the bottom and the back and it said Warner Brother Records, Burbank. So I called them. Is Randy there? I was young. I was very naive. And the woman said, no, Randy Newman's not here. I said, well, how can I reach him? What's this about? He'll know. Well, she gave me the number of his lawyer and his manager and his agent and a bunch of numbers. And I called them all, did the same thing. There's Randy Newman there. And says, Chuck Lorre, I need to talk to him. I don't know what it's about. About a week later, my phone rings. This is Chuck Lorre? Yeah. This is Randy Newman.
Oh.
I, of course, said, are you sure? You've been calling everybody. I told him, I said, I was just enamored with his work, and I was pursuing songwriting, and he was very gentle and graceful, and I actually got to meet him many years later at the 1987 writer's strike. Oh, yeah. He had co-written Three Amigos, so he's walking around with a picket sign because they called him, come picket. And he's walking alongside me and he went, what exactly are we picketing for? They said come, he came, it was great. And we walked over to Cantor's, we took a leak together, it was great. I reminded him of the story, he didn't remember it. But that was why I came to Los Angeles, I wanted to write songs.
And you did. You actually had a big hit, French Kissin' in the USA for...
I wouldn't call it a big hit.
Well,
You can actually argue that it ended Debbie Harry's career. But it was a single for Debbie Harry from Blondie, and then I had the great good fortune of getting a chance to write a theme song and score for a little cartoon that turned into Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So that really was great. That got the kids' dentistry work done, and that was terrific.
The score that he wrote for Cold Turkey was brilliant.
Oh, Randy Newman, yeah, absolutely.
I always think it's the most undiscovered. The score was so deeply American. And that's great. The opening song was Randy at the piano singing himself. He gives us all his love.
God's song, yeah.
Yeah, he gives us all his love.
Sail Away, yeah.
And the camera is following. This is the first thing you see, a dog coming up a country road and sniffing at a pole. Here, the sign is some, Air Corps group that left town, some other place that's busted to get, is crossing. One take, it's like pole after pole after pole. Finally comes to a pole at the end of this road and the end of the song, and lifts a leg and pees. And the camera tilts up, and there are 16 churches listed on this sign. That's where my head was on religion.
You directed that.
Not God, religion.
Perfect song.
You directed that movie, and I noticed you don't have a whole lot of solo directing credits, and neither do you, Chuck. Both of you are producer-writers to the core, and occasionally have directed. Is there a reason why?
I loved the experience, but didn't wish to do it again. I didn't wish to spend my time explaining why I think this should be this way.
And what about for you, Chuck? I know you directed Dharma and Greg, I believe, and
I'm involved in the staging of every episode that we do. So
you just don't take the credit.
no, it's not even about that. The time is better spent writing. I mean, because the actors are rehearsing. We're working on next week's script.
Yeah.
Because next week's script has to be there, and regardless of what's happening this week, there has to be a script next week. So it's time management, basically. It's the time's better
The
spent.
same answer. I didn't want to spend the time talking. I wanted to spend the time writing.
but that one movie you directed is a classic waiting to be rediscovered on Blu-ray. If whoever owns it would please put it out on Blu-ray, because that and Divorce American Style, you were Oscar nominated for that. Another great one.
For the screenplay.
Yeah, for the screenplay. Yeah. Let me ask you now, because we've only got 5 minutes, I'm being told, and it's killing me because I've got all these things. But I wanted to talk about, you both work in network TV so much. You're now working with Netflix in a whole new world here.
We're doing a Latino version, Cuban American version of One Day at a Time.
And that's all, yes.
We're Rita Moreno, and there are a few people who know Rita Moreno well. And Justina Machado. I mean, I'm having a great time. They're wonderful.
It's the basic premise. Are you not recycling any of the storylines?
No. It's totally different. 3 generations of women who happen to be Cuban American.
So that's going to be how many episodes?
13. That's what
13. Whereas you guys are so used to coming out of network TV, where it's anywhere from 22 to 26. 26 there.
Yeah, 24 Big Bangs.
Yeah, and we were talking a little bit before about the pressures of doing that. Can you talk about that versus what everybody in cable now and the world of streaming has a different deal, and maybe it's not as much pressure to turn out 10 episodes or 13 as it is to do consistent quality on that.
I just think there's an exhaustion factor that comes into play when you're on show 17 or 18, and you want every one of them to work. I mean, you want every episode to be the best episode you can make it. But there comes a point in the year when you're starting shooting. You start writing in June, and you start shooting in August, and you don't stop really till April. And it's a marathon. And
And if you're doing it Chuck Lorre's way, you got a live audience. So you have tired actors and live people who come for the experience of seeing these actors do their thing. It's tough.
And what about the whole idea of doing Netflix now, where they put it all on the air all at once, and you can watch all 13 episodes in a day? Are you into binge viewing, Norman?
I am not into binge viewing. I bet maybe it isn't that I look down on it, it's that I've never found the time to do it.
But are there things you can do in this new project that you could never have done or never, tried to do on network television because you knew of the perimeters there, and now it's totally free?
But we're dealing with life and life problems, and I don't want to give away where we're going, but we're dealing with a couple of things I never dealt with.
but you can do 30 minutes instead of 21.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's different. There were no commercials.
No
And
commercials.
when we started off with All in the Family, I don't remember exactly what the figures were, but it was like 3 minutes, 4 minutes for commercials. I grew to 5 and 6.
It's almost 9 now.
Excess.
And you have to write to commercial breaks essentially too. So
Well, you kind of want to create some moment where you hopefully can encourage the audience to stick around through the Cialis commercials, sure. 2 people in a bathtub holding hands for some God knows reason, and then please wait through this and come back to see the rest of the show. So there is that impulse to try and create a moment at the end of an act that is intriguing, and that changes immediately when you're in the streaming world where you're just putting on your show.
do you want to go? You took Norman's mantle and title and became the
No
king.
one takes Norman's
Well,
mantle.
that's right.
Let's
But
be
you are
really
the
clear about this.
current king of CBS's comedy lineup, no question about it, as Norman was. And do you have any desire to go out into other types of networks and streaming and any of that?
Sure. I'd be interested in trying just the idea of just all the censorship issues are off the table. Interior kitchen stayed in fuck. Think about it. 30 years of network television, it'd probably be the first word out of any character's mouth if I were to write the script. Just because. For no reason whatsoever. They
You
actually,
want, there's a show that I want to do a great many years
kidding.
ago called Balls. Should we do that together?
Yeah. Great.
And everybody in the audience gets a piece of it. That could be done.
You know, the theme, I'll bring it right back to close here, the theme of this, and it's so great that the Writers Guild did this, so thank you, Writers Guild, and Warner Brothers, and YouTube, but longevity, there's something to be said.
Well, this is so interesting, because I want to tell you, the word longevity. I didn't think to tell you what Balls is all about. But he used the word now, I want to...
talking about long balls now? Because personally.
Yeah, Balls exclamation point. A small company somewhere in the South, I thought about it, that makes balls. Tennis balls, squash balls, medicine balls, balls.
Love it so far.
The whole town works in this little factory. You know, there are 2,000 people, 800 work in the factory, whatever it is. Another major international company wants to buy this little company. It would be great for the town if the international company made it a big, giant company. It would be great for the town. But the guy who owns the company is 94 years old, or 96 years old, or 101 years old.
Nobody's that old.
And maybe you don't even see him. He's upstairs and attractive nurses are going up and down.
We know this story. Okay.
And he has 3 sons who want desperately to kill him. I mean, everybody in town wants him dead. And he won't die. I mean, that's the other, everybody's a character, of course, but that's where it starts.
Okay. I'm in.
Okay. Are you in?
Yeah.
Leave your name out there.
Seems like a Viacom kind of thing, wouldn't it?
I worked on it with Helsinger, with Des, the director. Des, great stage director.
Backing up.
Backing up. Yeah, Des backing up years and years and years. I mean, 25 years ago.
You were working with him?
Yeah, we were working on a script
with him. Okay.
and I think Terrence McNally. No, it was what's his name who won he's won a Pulitzer Prize since Spanish. I'll remember. Anyway,
You remember the piano player's name was Pope. Danny Thomas's piano player's name, you remember that? Wally Pop. I forgot. 9 minutes
Jerry
ago.
Lewis was Pope.
Jerry Lewis was the Pope. This was Pop.
I just want to listen to you two talk all day, but we can't. But we do have a reception out in the lobby, going to have lots of food and drink and all of that. And let's thank Norman, Lear, and Chuck.
Yeah.